Did you know that between 1962 and 1964, a serial killer terrorized Boston, murdering 13 women in their own apartments? And to this day, there's still debate over whether police caught the right man. This is the story of the Boston Strangler, one of America's most infamous serial killers, and a case that's far more complicated than most people realize. June 14, 1962. Anna Sleesers, a 55-year-old seamstress, didn't show up to meet her son for dinner. When he went to check on her apartment in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood, he found something haunting. His mother was dead, strangled with the cord of her own bathrobe, tied in an elaborate bow. She'd been sexually assaulted and left in a degrading position. Boston police initially thought it was isolated, an incident, a robbery gone wrong perhaps, but they were devastatingly wrong. 2 weeks later, on June 30th, 68-year-old Nina Nichols was found strangled in her apartment with her own stockings. The same day, 65-year-old Helen Blake was discovered in her apartment, also strangled. August brought 2 more victims. Then September. All elderly women, all killed in their apartments, all strangled with articles of their own clothing, often tied in distinctive bows. The city of Boston descended into panic. Women, especially elderly women living alone, were terrified. Hardware stores sold out of locks and chains. Locksmiths couldn't keep up with demand. Women formed groups and refused to be alone. The police were under enormous pressure, but they had almost nothing to go on. No witnesses, no clear evidence, no suspects. Then in December 1962, something shifted. The victim was younger, 20-year-old Sophie Clark, an African-American student. She'd been strangled with her own stockings in her apartment. A few weeks later, 23-year-old Patricia Bissett was found murdered in her bed. The strangler was no longer targeting only elderly women. The fear that had gripped elderly women now spread to everyone. No woman in Boston felt safe. The killer seemed to be able to talk his way into any apartment. There were no signs of forced entry. Victims seemed to let him in willingly, suggesting he was charming, non-threatening, perhaps posing as a repairman. By 1963, the attacks continued with a brutal efficiency. Beverly Sammons, 23, was stabbed multiple times, a deviation from the strangling method. Evelyn Corbin, 58, strangled with nylon stockings. Joanne Graff, 23, strangled and sexually assaulted. The youngest victim, 19-year-old Mary Sullivan, was murdered. On January 4, 1964, she'd been strangled with a scarf and left in a particularly horrifying scene. 13 women dead, an entire city living in fear, and police were no closer to catching the killer than they'd been on day 1. The break in the case came from an unexpected place. In October 1964, a man was arrested for breaking into a woman's apartment and tying her up. But he didn't hurt her. He apologized and left. The woman's description led police to Albert DeSalvo, a married man with 2 children who worked as a maintenance man. DeSalvo had a record. He'd been arrested years earlier as the measuring man. He'd go door to door claiming to be a talent scout, asking women if he could take their measurements. Creepy, but not violent. He'd also been identified as the Green Man, named for the green work clothes he wore while breaking in to hundreds of apartments across New England and sexually assaulting women. While in custody for these crimes, DeSalvo began talking to his cellmate, George Nassar, and what he said was shocking. He claimed to be the Boston Strangler. Nassar, through his attorney F. Lee Bailey, brought this information to police. In March 1965, DeSalvo confessed to being the Boston Strangler. He provided details about the crime scenes that only the killer would know. He described the apartments, the victims, what they were wearing, how he killed them. The level of detail was stunning and, to many investigators, convincing. But here's where the story gets complicated. DeSalvo was never actually tried for the Boston Strangler murders. Why? Because the confession alone wasn't enough. There was no physical evidence linking him to the scenes, no witnesses, and confessions can be unreliable, especially ones given without a lawyer present. Instead, DeSalvo was tried and convicted for the Green Man crimes, the sexual assaults and robberies he'd committed across New England. He was sentenced to life in prison. The public was told they'd caught the Boston Strangler, and the case was essentially closed. But not everyone was convinced. Some investigators didn't believe DeSalvo was the Strangler. The crime scenes showed different methods, different levels of violence. Some victims were elderly, some young. Some were strangled with stockings, others with scarves or other items. Could this really be one killer? Some theorized that DeSalvo had learned details about the crimes from newspapers, other inmates, or even from police. During questioning, his cellmate George Nassar, remember, was highly intelligent and had been a suspect himself in one of the murders. Could Nassar have fed DeSalvo information? Others pointed out that DeSalvo seemed to be seeking fame and attention. He'd tried to sell his story for money to support his family, Was this a false confession for profit and notoriety? Albert DeSalvo never got his day in court for the Boston Strangler murders. In 1973, he was stabbed to death in his prison cell at Walpole State Prison. His killer was never officially identified, though another inmate was believed responsible. DeSalvo took whatever truth he knew to his grave. The Boston Strangler case remains one of the most controversial. In American crime history, 13 women lost their lives. A city lived in terror. And despite a confession from Albert DeSalvo and his subsequent conviction for other crimes, questions still linger about whether he was truly responsible for all 13 murders, or if the real Boston Strangler or stranglers got away with murder.